Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. A big earthquake just struck off the coast of Naples, Italy. And in fact, this is the biggest earthquake in 10 years, going back to 2016, being a magnitude 6 earthquake. And it's highly unusual because of its depth at 381 kilometers below the surface. So it's the strongest earthquake since a magnitude 6 triple burst in 2016. It's also incredibly deep. It also is very significant because of its location of rupture. The epicenter being just off the coast of Naples, which is bounded on both sides by two very significant volcanoes. We have Mount Vesuvius there to the east, which was responsible for the destruction of Pompeii. I'm sure you've seen that imagery of the ash mummies that were left behind. Then we have to the west, Campi Flegrei supervolcano, Italy's largest volcano, at least in terms of its destructive potential. Last erupting in 1538 with the Monte Nuovo eruption. That was a VEI2 eruption, killed a few dozen people, but ultimately not that big of a deal. But it has the potential to do a VEI6 eruption. That would be 10 to 100 cubic kilometers of dry rock equivalent material, and perhaps could even do a VEI7 eruption. It has done these sort of very large VEI5, VEI6 eruptions in the past, hasn't done one now for thousands of years, but the activity at Campi Flegrei has been increasing since the turn of the millennium, specifically 2005. And in fact, seismicity, uplift, and gas emissions have been increasing exponentially since 2020, with 2025 last year being a record year for earthquake activity at Campi Flegrei. Now we've had this magnitude 6 earthquake striking at extreme depth, and that is important because all that seismic energy that was released from that event radiated upwards, also of course outwards too, but radiated upwards through the entire volcanic system. All the plumbing, for example, and the magma conduits and chambers that exist in this part of Italy were then hit with a very strong pressure wave as a result of that earthquake. And what we've seen, for example, last year, 2025, being a great example, was that when you have a very powerful earthquake, it can trigger a chain reaction that then leads to volcanic eruptions. So we had the magnitude 8.8 megaquake off the coast of Kamchatka, Russia on the 29th of July. Just days later, we had tons of volcanic activity erupt on the Kamchatka Peninsula, and notably we had Krishenikov volcano wake up for the first time in 600 years. It is still erupting as of this moment right now, March 2026. Also back in February of this year, we had a magnitude 6.4 earthquake strike Vanuatu in the Pacific Ocean. And then just days afterwards, we have a volcanic eruption start up on Ambae Island that is still ongoing, very significant. So we see this connection between tectonic events and volcanic events, and now this magnitude 6 earthquake having disrupted with this sound and pressure wave, that shock wave, this entire volcanic system around Naples, which includes Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius. And I'd be more concerned about Campi Flegrei because it's been showing more signs of activity than Vesuvius, but we can't discount Vesuvius as well, both of them being very powerful volcanic systems. And in fact, this energy went out all across Italy because of its extreme depth, though not that many people felt it. Even people in Naples, there are very few reports of people feeling this, or if they did, it was just a very quick jolt. I'm in Rome right now. I did not feel this earthquake. It occurred at 11:03 p.m. on the 9th of March. So we have a lot to discuss in this video about this magnitude 6 earthquake and Campi Flegrei. Let's jump right into it. Now, before we discuss Campi Flegrei supervolcano more, let's just look at the historic seismicity for Italy going back to 2010. This USGS map set for all earthquakes magnitude 6 or greater. We see lots of earthquakes, of course, at those magnitudes and greater across the globe. Even, for example, these nuclear tests from North Korea, those show up there during this time frame. But let's zoom in right here. This is our latest earthquake. At 381.7 kilometers below the surface, magnitude 6. And you'll notice we only have 5 earthquakes for Italy during this time frame, going back to 2010. Okay, so we see these 3 there and 1 right here. Let's click this one. This is a magnitude 6 earthquake that occurred 2012 on the 20th of May there. And then if we go and zoom in here, we see very interesting triple bursts of activity. So we had an earthquake on the 24th of August, 2016, magnitude 6.2. And then on the 26th of October that year, a magnitude 6.1. And then on the 30th of October, a magnitude 6.6. So all these clearly connected together, even though there is a little bit of distance in between them, but their temporal clustering and equivalent magnitudes telling you that that was one significant tectonic event. And now we see this magnitude 6 here at depth, 381 kilometers. That could potentially lead to some earthquake activity closer to the surface. So this is the developing story as it relates to earthquake activity. This is certainly not over. Just because we have this magnitude 6 does not mean that's all she wrote there. But really, I'm looking at this more from a volcanic perspective, because look how close this occurred to two very large volcanoes, Vesuvius and Campi Flegrei. We've been having increasing seismicity at an exponential rate at Campi Flegrei since 2020. It's really concentrated right here in this area, but you can see that this is not that far away in terms of its epicenter location, but keep in mind, it is down 381 kilometers. So it actually is quite far away if you take that into account, because for example, I'm here in Rome as I film this, I did not feel this. That distance from Rome to Naples is less than 381 kilometers. I think it's like 180 kilometers, something like that. We can actually measure it out here really quick. So we'll go to our measure tool, we'll click Rome, we'll go down to this epicenter, 197 kilometers or so. So this actually occurred pretty far away if you take that into account, about double the distance from Rome to this epicenter. But that doesn't mean that it had no effect. In fact, that pressure wave traveled completely up through any sort of magma conduits that exist in the subsurface. And we know that they do underneath Vesuvius and Campi Flegrei, because if it had struck, let's say, at 50 kilometers of depth, you would have a pressure wave that goes up, and then you would also have a pressure wave that goes down. And so the direction of propagation would be different. And as a result of it being at about 400 kilometers depth, there's only one direction of propagation that matters for that pressure wave as it relates to these volcanic systems. So that is very important. And you add into that this increasing activity at Campi Flegrei and its potential for very large eruptions, which it hasn't done in thousands of years. And this is definitely a troubling sign. Now let's look at some of the statistics for Campi Flegrei thanks to Volcano Discovery. I'll link this page in the video description if you want to check this out yourself. We're going to scroll straight down to the earthquake activity over time here. So here's the number of quakes per year, and we have magnitude 2 quakes there in gray, magnitude 3 plus quakes there in red, and magnitude 4 plus quakes there in black. And so we see that there is this increase here in 1984. That was quite significant. A seismic burst that occurred at Campi Flegrei did not result in an eruption. We see that activity effectively stayed flat until the turn of the millennium. And then starting in 2005, we start to see this increase in earthquakes across the board. But really magnitude 2 earthquakes really started to go up. Here's 2008, for example. There were 5 magnitude 2 plus quakes. Okay, now let's go to 2020. We have 25 magnitude 2 plus quakes. You have 2 magnitude 3 plus quakes, 0 magnitude 4. Well, we go to 2024, and this is when I really first started reporting on Campi Flegrei. I've done a lot of videos on Campi Flegrei since then. We see in 2024, we had 121 magnitude 2 quakes. We had 27 magnitude 3, 2 magnitude 4. We go to 2025, and well, everything increased. 5 magnitude 4 plus quakes, 35 magnitude 3 plus, and 200 magnitude 2 plus quakes. So again, exponential increase. 2026 has been quite active thus far as well. We can look at that with this data here showing the frequency of earthquakes, their magnitude based off of their color, and the seismic energy release. So anytime you see a magnitude 4+ quake, you see this massive jump up in the seismic energy release because stronger earthquakes release a lot more energy. A magnitude 4 earthquake, for example, releases 32 times more energy than a magnitude 3. So the scaling is significant. And the same would hold for magnitude 5 versus a magnitude 4. So we see even with all these earthquakes here with the seismic burst in February, which we did see pre-earthquake signals for all the way up in Cumiana, Italy, which is remarkable. We see that the seismic energy release during that seismic burst was less than that magnitude 4.6 that occurred there the 30th of June. And so we had just a lot of activity overall. We see these seismic bursts isolated. Also, just in general, a lot of activity there at the end of the year, just low-grade seismicity increasing across the board. We can look at 2026. Just keep in mind, this is showing 0 megawatt hours for the seismic energy, and here showing 1 megawatt hour. So very rarely did we go above that 1 megawatt hour line unless we had magnitude 4 quakes, for example. Now, if you go to 2026, we see again the same scaling, and we see a seismic burst right there, 120 quakes there at the very beginning of the year, in general settling out to more about 20 to 40 per day across a variety of magnitudes, 0, 1, 2, so on and so forth. But you see that our energy has been staying right in the zone that defined 2025, which has been the most active year for seismic activity at Campi Flegrei in our observational record in history. So it's probably only a matter of time, if this trend is going to continue, that we get more seismic bursts, more magnitude 4+ earthquakes, perhaps even magnitude 5. I mean, 4.6 is starting to get close. So a tremendous amount of energy happening at Campi Flegrei close to the surface. We can look at that magnitude and depth over time graphics right here. Here we can look at the last year. And you see that almost all of them are concentrated in the top 5 kilometers closest to the surface. That is where you have this fractured caprock over the magma chamber that's very close to the surface in the Bay of Pozzuoli, just to the west of Naples. And the latest data, because there are so many earthquakes, we're getting better and better imaging of the subsurface features. Those seismic waves have information embedded with them that we can then analyze and plot and compute and everything and model. That caprock is heavily fractured. It's very, very weak. And so you just need effectively enough depressurization to occur with that magma chamber for then the whole thing to go. That has happened in the past, and at some point it's very likely to happen again in the future. We've been seeing tons of activity at Campi Flegrei. It's not a dead system. It's very, very alive. Again, uplift is increasing dramatically, and gas emissions are also increasing dramatically since 2020. All that riding on top of an already fairly notable increase going back to the turn of the millennium. So lots of earthquake activity at Campi Flegrei in the past 5 years. 2026 is likely going to continue that, and I would say that's especially likely now considering we had that magnitude 6 earthquake, that pressure wave coming up, likely now starting to cause a chain reaction in the system. The key question is really not if. I think, of course, there's this interaction that's occurring. The key is how significant is that if? And then after that, when? Because these things do take time. So that pressure wave moving through, really affecting that system, but just how much did it affect the system? Is it going to lead to some sort of big eruption? That is a big unknown. But we do have a little bit of guidance here. We can look at our true sky geocentric astronomical charts for this magnitude 6 earthquake that occurred just yesterday. This is at 11:03 p.m. That's local time on the 9th of March. And we can also look at the position of the planets in the constellations, true sky position, everything accurate to constellation size, and all 13 constellations, the Fucus included, for the Monte Nuevo eruption back in 1538. There are some remarkable similarities here. We'll start with some of the big ones. You have here Jupiter in the constellation of Gemini. You have Jupiter in the constellation of Gemini. So the biggest planet in our solar system, most mass, fairly close to the inner planets, also close to the outer planets, right? the main influence over the sun's barycenter and more, same part of the sky in terms of the constellations. Here you see Neptune in Pisces. You also see Neptune in Pisces. So Neptune's also in the same position in the sky. You see Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn. So that's 3 for 3 now in the same constellations. Then you go a little bit further with the analysis. You see that you have the sun there just about to move into Pisces. We have Saturn in Pisces. If we move over to the eruption back in 1538, you have the sun in Virgo and you have Saturn in Virgo, opposite effectively the location that they were for this magnitude 6 earthquake. So opposition being the second most powerful sort of planetary alignment that you can have, right behind a conjunction when the two are close together, okay? And then in addition to that, you have Uranus here in a trine to Pluto, which is a significant aspect. And in this chart here, back, the sky position back in 1538 at this time was that you had a very precise Uranus-Pluto opposition. So they were also an aspect. So tremendous amount of overlap between the planetary positions with this magnitude 6 earthquake, which at first glance is not connected to Campi Flegrei, and the last eruption of Campi Flegrei, and the only historic eruption that we know for Campi Flegrei, because it was active, really active thousands of years ago. It's kind of simmered down since then, but now it's starting to ramp back up again. And I don't take this as the end-all be-all for suggesting that there's going to be something imminent, but you look at this and it's just another piece of data pointing in that direction, so I think it's worth taking into account. My general rule of thumb when analyzing something is not to take one single data point and blow it out of proportion, but to look at all the available data that we have and seeing if there's congruence and agreement between them and what the overall story is suggesting. Here we see our strongest earthquakes at Campi Flegrei in Pozzuoli Bay going back the past 5 years. This is set for magnitude 4 and greater. And well, you see all those magnitude 4 earthquakes that have occurred. It's been quite a lot. So here we see a magnitude 4.6 right there. That was the June 30th, 2025 earthquake. And you see that this is in the Gulf of Pozzuoli. This is where that magma chamber is. You have a tremendous amount of uplift and subsidence that's occurring here. So it's called bradyseism, where it's going up and down. It's literally breathing. You can see some really cool evidence of bradyseism with some of the Roman ruins, which were submerged underwater at time, and now they're back above the surface. We investigated that in 2017 with the TV show Secrets of the Underground. You could watch that if you want. Here we see a magnitude 4.4 earthquake right there on the 20th of May 2024. I reported on that when it occurred. Here we see September 1st, a magnitude 4+ quake, and this is right here in Solfatara, which is where we're having tons of fumarole activity, gas emissions, bubbling pits of mud and more. A tremendous amount of activity. That is one of the main areas where you can see it for yourself. If you are brave enough, you could say, just a reminder to bring a bit of humanity into this, there are thousands and thousands of people living here. And even with this increasing activity, there hasn't really been any concerted effort to perhaps get these people moved to a more safe location. They've lived here for decades, and really this place has been populated for thousands of years now. And we don't know what's going to happen with Campi Flegrei. Maybe it goes up and then things ramp back down. The next 1,000 years are cool and chill. Like, that's certainly possible. But it's probably going to be a situation that when it does erupt, there's not going to be really any advance warning for people. Because if there's really been nothing done thus far, we've been seeing everything just go up exponentially. Well, it doesn't give me too much hope. We have Naples, of course, nearby. So you actually have millions in this area. And if you have a VEI 6 eruption, let's say 50 cubic kilometers of material ejected, dry rock equivalent, this entire area would be devastated. I mean, you would have ash falling across Europe in a scenario like that. That'd be a massive, massive volcanic eruption that would affect all of Europe, North Africa, Mediterranean, going to Turkey, even probably into the Caucasus and more. So we hope that doesn't happen. It's certainly possible though, and we hope that geologic time takes this a lot further out than any time in the near future. But we're seeing increasing seismicity, these magnitude 4+ quakes being quite large or shallow right in that caprock region. The scientists are saying this is being driven by hydrothermal fluid activity moving through these cracks and creating fractures. But with the size of them, magnitude 4+ quakes for a volcanic system is quite large. I wouldn't be surprised if some of that is due to magma intrusions at depth as well, so keep that in mind. And here we see our seismic activity for Campi Flegrei going back to the beginning of this year, magnitude 2 and greater. So we know that most of earthquakes are occurring less than magnitude 2, so they're likely to be driven by that movement of hydrothermal fluids, saline, salt-ridden solutions, very high temperature coming up. That's what creates Solfatara crater and some of these other fumaroles and that sort of activity that exists in the area. But we do get some big earthquakes. Already this year, we're seeing a lot of magnitude 2s. That's a 2.4 right there. Here we have a 3.5. That was on the 28th of February, so not that long ago, just about 2 weeks ago, not even, we had a magnitude 3.5 earthquake that struck right in that area. And this really shows pretty nicely where Campi Flegrei is situated on the whole. That entire region being very active. And again, if we bring our magnitude 6 into the equation, it occurred roughly here, so it's not that far away. And again, that seismic wave propagating all the way up from 380 kilometers down to the surface. People did feel it. By the time it got to the surface, it was heavily attenuating, meaning that energy was absorbed into the subsurface at all those different depths, right? So that energy, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It was absorbed into all those systems. And now there is more stress in those rocks. That's how stress builds up on faults in part, is that you have earthquakes from other areas loading energy into them. And really, once that caprock under Campi Flegrei fractures enough, there's enough latent pressure and energy with that magma chamber for the whole thing to go. So this magnitude 6 is not helping the situation. That much is clear. That much I can very confidently state. And so we just hope that overall the effect of that magnitude 6 on Campi Flegrei and also Vesuvius, Mount Etna, all the volcanoes along the Campanian arc, we hope that overall it was insignificant in effect, but we know that it did affect them, again being the strongest earthquake since 2016. So that's your update for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Please smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow. Subscribe to stay up to date on what is happening with the Earth energetically. We cover earthquakes, volcanoes, geomagnetic storms, severe weather, space weather, for example, solar activity, solar flares, planetary alignments, planetary geometry, comets, interstellar and cosmic forces, consciousness, everything. I wrap that together and present videos almost daily on this channel and also on my Clips channel, both of those linked in the video description. Thank you all so much. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Prayers for Italy, all the amazing, wonderful people that live here. We hope something like this does not happen, though we know that the Earth does these sort of geologic events. So it certainly is possible. Prayers for Italy. Thanks so much and have a great day.